Poverty stats in our worldwide. Trends in global poverty by 2021, an estimated 698 million people, or 9% of the world's population, will be living in extreme poverty, or on less than $1.90 per day. But before we begin, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for such amazing and informative videos. This video is brought to you by Feed the Poor Foundation of America. To join or support us from anywhere, visit www.feedthepoor.world. Over 1,803 million people worldwide live below the higher poverty line of $3.20 per day, and over 2,293 million people live below $5.50 per day. Between 2019 and 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing global economic downturn are estimated to have increased the number of people living in extreme poverty by 50 million. As the global economy begins to recover in 2021, it is anticipated that the number of people living in extreme poverty will decrease. But there are still an estimated 8 million more people living in poverty today than there were in 2019. This comes after decades of remarkable reductions in poverty. But before we begin, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for such amazing and informative videos. This video is brought to you by Feed the Poor Foundation of America. To join or support us from anywhere, visit www.feedthepoor.world. In 2010, an estimated 1.1 billion people, roughly 16% of the world's population, were living in extreme poverty, compared to nearly 2 billion in 1990. Trends in poverty at the regional and national levels. China and India have seen the greatest national reductions in the number of people living in extreme poverty. Between 2010 and 2021, more than 407 million people in those two countries were able to escape extreme poverty. Between 2010 and 2020, 26 countries in sub-Saharan Africa saw an increase in the number of people living in extreme poverty. Angola, 9.4 million, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 8.8 million, and South Sudan, 7 million, saw the largest increases. Sub-Saharan Africa will house 66% of the world's extreme poverty population in 2021. Additionally, there has been an increase in poverty in fragile and conflict-affected nations. Yemen saw the greatest increase in the number of people living in extreme poverty worldwide between 2010 and 2021. With 16 million more people living below the poverty line in 2021 than in 2010. In Venezuela, the number of people living in extreme poverty rose by 10 million, and in Syria, it is estimated that the number of people living in poverty rose by 6.7 million. However, it is difficult to obtain accurate data in these situations. Accessibility and timeliness of data as the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, enter their 10th year of implementation. Essential poverty data are still out of date. 2017 is the most recent year for which the World Bank released data on global poverty. Up to 2019, partial data is now reported, however, global estimates have not been made available due to the absence of India-specific data. We used income distribution data from the World Bank's POFL-Net to make estimates for 2020 and 2021. We then multiplied incomes by 85% of the IMF's World Economic Outlook's forecasted GDP per capita growth rates, which is the estimated share of GDP growth that goes to households. There are a number of significant ways that current measures of global poverty are incomplete. For instance, because the data are measured at the household level, differences in poverty within households are obscured. Some nations do not have any data at all. Additionally, the very poorest individuals, those with the lowest expenditure or income, standard of living is not taken into account when poverty is measured by a threshold line. The income distribution is assumed to remain unchanged in the projections that extend beyond the year for which data were last available. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated how crucial it is to have accurate and up-to-date data in order to comprehend the dynamics of poverty and respond appropriately to areas of greatest need. If we are serious about monitoring the SDGs, the timeliness of this data needs to improve. What does it entail to be poor? Living in poverty means not having enough money to cover your basic needs. Consider a person's economic resources, such as the amount of money they receive, income, the amount they spend, expenditure or consumption, the amount they have saved, or the value of their assets, wealth, as one method of determining poverty. According to this definition, economic poverty is poverty. One indicator of the needs of the poorest is economic poverty. Poverty can also be social, cultural, nutritional, or multifaceted. These additional factors are not directly measured by the global definition of extreme poverty. A better understanding and reporting of individual economic, social, nutritional, and cultural needs and resources is required to achieve the first SDG goal of ending poverty everywhere. Metrics that go beyond purely economic terms are the only way to fully evaluate poverty. In the fight to end poverty, tools like the Multidimensional Poverty Index, food poverty indices, inequality indices, and fragility and vulnerability measures are essential. Poverty-stricken individuals are among the most vulnerable members of society. Policymakers must be able to access accurate information regarding who is impoverished, where, and why in order to end poverty and improve the livelihoods of the poorest people. In addition to a lack of resources, the poorest families typically experience higher rates of infant mortality, higher rates of child stunting, and lower rates of educational attainment. To accomplish this objective, it is essential to keep track of poverty on a global, regional, and national scale. The first Sustainable Development Goal, SDG, commits nations to reducing poverty in all its dimensions and in accordance with national definitions. What is the measurement of economic poverty? Absolute poverty has a fixed value, while relative poverty has a value that is in relation to the rest of the population. A poverty line, or the minimum amount of money needed to meet basic needs, is how absolute poverty is measured. If a person's income, expenditures, or wealth fall below this threshold, they are considered to be living in poverty. On the other hand, relative poverty is determined by comparison to other people. If a person's income, expenditures, or wealth are significantly lower than the average for the rest of the population, they are in poverty. The extreme poverty line, which is a measure of absolute poverty with a threshold of $1.90 per person per day, is the international standard for measuring poverty. The minimum income or expenditure required to meet very basic needs is referred to as the extreme poverty threshold. Numerous individuals have argued that the extreme poverty line is too low. Two more neediness lines, which mirror the expenses of higher essential necessities in additional created nations, are likewise utilized globally, $3 and 20 cents and $5 and 50 cents per day for each individual. In addition, each nation establishes its own poverty lines to provide a representation of poverty in relation to the average income of that nation. In 2011, countries used purchasing power parity currency conversions to set the extreme poverty line at $1.90. The value of the $1.90 line reflects the same local value of goods and services in different countries at different times because PPP conversions reflect the real buying power of a currency. National household surveys, which collect data on population income and/or expenditure, are used to measure international poverty. POVCLNet, a global repository for poverty data maintained by the World Bank, contains data from over 2 million household surveys conducted in 168 economies between 1981 and 2019. Data from POVCLNet and national sources are utilized in the production of international, regional, and national poverty measures as well as in the tracking of poverty over time. However, it is still limited due to the people who are frequently left out of household surveys, the inability to disaggregate within households, and the lengthy time lag between the time the data is collected and made available for analysis. Trends in global poverty. The Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, were primarily aimed at reducing global poverty. Between 1990 and 2015, the MDGs wanted to cut the number of people living in extreme poverty by half. This was accomplished 3 years ahead of schedule on a global scale in 2012. The Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which were established in 2015, now place ending poverty at their core. No poverty by 2030 is the first of its 17 objectives. We can learn how close the world is to achieving this goal by following global progress on extreme poverty. 16% of the world's population was estimated to be living below the poverty line in 2010, or 1.1 billion people. 714 million people, or 9% of the world's population, were living in extreme poverty in 2017, according to the estimates. We estimate that 690 million people lived in extreme poverty in 2019, a decline that continued into 2019. Click the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, if you're interested in learning more amazing facts, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to get notified by our new videos. Thanks for watching this video. And be part of our global movement. Visit www.worldfeedthepooride.org.